Hello and welcome to Builders, the podcast where we explore the minds behind groundbreaking products and ideas. I'm your host, Lee Haynes, and today I'm thrilled to have Khizar Naeem, product lead at Deel, the global platform powering payroll, compliance, and contractor management in more than 150 countries. Khizar has years of experience in product management, focusing on building solutions that blend data-driven insights with customer empathy. In this episode, we'll explore how AI is reshaping the craft of product management, the rise of senior individual contributors, and what it takes to build products for a truly global audience. Khizar, welcome to the podcast. It's fantastic to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. We're finally getting to do this. So excited about it.
We've been waiting a little while, a bit of back and forth cancellations and whatnot, right? So really nice to sit down and talk finally. Let's start with your path, Khizar. Can you share a bit about your journey, what led you into product management, and how did your experiences kind of prepare you for your role at Deel today?
For sure. My path has been, I would say, unconventional. So to say, I started as a software engineer. So I'm software engineer by craft, and that's what I always wanted to do. I wanted to build products, but a couple of years into my software engineering career, maybe 5 to 6 years, building products, one of the things that really annoyed me was that the kind of companies I was working for, at least, there was a lot of this, the task monkey role description of a software engineer, where I was really vocal about opinions on how the product should be built. And back then in Netherlands, it was a lot of you would have a business analyst who was deciding what should be done, and I was the only one who would have a lot of back and forth because I was very opinionated, and I would really bring up what we should do for the customers. I remember this example about the company I was working for, and there was a lot of customers saying, we want free shipping, and I would constantly bring up that point. It doesn't do with it's anything to do with code, but it was something they've been constantly asking for.
Yeah.
So it's just that whole thing led me to naively believe I can do this whole, back then it's product owners. I was I can do this better. And then, in that naive thinking, I just wanted to go do what these business analysts were doing. Just hey, I want to make sure that the developers or designers are working on the right thing. And it wasn't called product management, at least in Netherlands, it wasn't. So I just went up to the company, my bosses, and I said, I want to do this thing. And it didn't work out at that company. So then what I did is just, I looked at a company, and I looked at what they did, and I thought, okay, I can actually really help them out, building an API and building integrations. So I wrote a job description which was hey, I think you need that person. And in the same email, I applied to the same job. I was I think you need this person, and I'm the right person. So it worked out for me. I got that job, and that was my first product gig.
Nice. And where was that? Was that the role for Deel or?
No, that wasn't it for Deel. That was a company called Thard. It was a small SaaS company focusing on feedback. It later evolved into candidate experience, but that was the first product gig I had. And that's when I got into the gig. And of course, everybody naively believes they can do something, but then at the actual job, then you get to learn. And so how that prepared me to coming to Deel is years of iteration over building products and listening to customers, understanding their needs. And after a while, I got into essentially remote work also. Back then, Zapier was super new. Probably Zapier and Elastic were the only companies who were doing remote. I got very much interested in going remote. And actually, before COVID, I was back at start. I was the one who was leading remote teams. So all the team, product team I was leading was completely remote. So I used to have this conversation with the CEO, which was we should have everybody go remote. And then eventually from there, COVID happened, and then everybody started going remote. And then that's when I heard about Deel. which
Yeah.
because the first of all, like Deel came started right before COVID, and then during COVID time, the need just accelerated in the
Yeah.
market, and that's where I came across Deel, and so I kept it in my back pocket, which was like, okay, this is an interesting company to just keep my eye on.
Mm.
And eventually, after a couple of years, yeah, so I had like a DM on LinkedIn, and then eventually landed the role at Deel. So there's a lot
Nice.
that came together for me to be at Deel and then be in this role for the last 3 years.
Nice, really nice. And when you look back, were there any pivotal moments or like mentors who have kind of shaped your philosophy on building products?
Yeah, absolutely. A huge credit goes out to it's not a single person, but it's an organization, Techstars. The Techstars used
Okay.
to have this event they still have it, which is like a very grassroots level event called Startup Weekend. And the idea is that a bunch of people come together at this event with the startup idea, and then the event is about going from an idea to like an
Mm.
MVP, like a startup within like 3 days.
Nice.
Um, I attended one, and then I used to organize in Amsterdam, and then eventually I started facilitating. I went to different countries in Europe as a facilitator. That event shaped my product thinking a lot because it was very much about how you take an idea and then how you build a product, and then everything was about talking to customers, getting customer insights, and like somebody has an idea. Like I remember this one person had the idea of launching a rocket to moon or something, and then it's a
Mm.
very ambitious idea. Of course, you can't do this in 3 days, but the
But
idea
yeah,
is
you
that
say over a weekend, yeah.
exactly. So, but the how you go from that into actually building it, the first step is like validating your idea, and it's like the
Yeah.
start of weekend. It instilled in you the fact that you have to go talk to customers, you have to validate it, and then once you validate it, you have to build like the MVP. So
Mm.
that event shaped my product thinking quite a bit. And then a few people that I've worked with, they also they brought different experience being product managers in the past. So they shaped my thinking on how to actually build scalable products. So like on one hand, I learned how to be scrappy and
Mm.
fast. On the other hand, I learned to build like, okay, how do you actually now go build a business around it, which the
Mm.
product management there's a part of it which is about like building features and everything. But I largely believe product managers are responsible for building and scaling businesses. So a lot of that I learned from different folks at my time at Start, my time at MessageBird, and now lately my time at Deel. I've learned a lot, especially from our like leaders, like how to actually build scalable business lines, not just products.
Yeah, yeah. And to talk a little bit about customer insight as well, because Deal operates at like an incredible scale, right? 150 countries over. I think we mentioned in the intro, and so you're serving thousands of companies and yeah, processing billions in global payroll, right? So how do you like balance quantitative signals with this qualitative feedback from such a big and diverse user base?
Yeah, that's it definitely there's like a time and place for both of these. So I do think you need like quantitative data to look across how your product is being used, how they're
Mm.
evolving. So there are the set of tools in place and set of like data analytics pipelines in place, which gives the ability to us PMs or anybody in the company data uh, to look at data a few different ways, and everybody wants to look at the data in a few different ways. To give you an example, like for me personally, I am able to run query in like our um, telemetry tool, which I can use to understand that, okay, how from like core to the engineering or core to the API, how somebody's calling our API.
Mm.
We can like slice it a few different ways, but then also from like a product user standpoint, we can look in our data analytics tool. And again, like visualize and slice the data a few different ways to understand like on a quantitative scale, like how, the whole customer base is interacting with your product.
Mm.
But then there's the other side. which is the customer insights, like qualitative. And when we talk about qualitative data gathering, is usually everybody's mind go to customer interviews, and I'm talking about the same thing, but essentially the culture there, especially at Deel, is just very much like being with the customer. So
Mm.
it's not just about building the like having like an interview process where you select a group and then you go interview them. It's actually being with the customer pre-sale, post-sale, and actually having the access to customers. A lot of our customers are in Slack. We're able to DM each other. They're
Mm.
able to tell us the problems they're facing, the ideas
Mm.
they're having, and that really essentially gives us the ability to think forward. And
Mm.
a recent example I have is I've been in numerous customer conversations who want to use our product more or less a similar way, and having the basically well, being able to talk to them gave me this insight where eventually I opened up a chat internally with a few like product leaders and then a few people, and I was like, hey, I've been noticing a pattern that these customers have been bringing up a use case which works like this. So I do think we should look into evolving our product
Mm.
according to like the certain needs they're having. And I believe that's a unique edge, because the data, quantitative data gives you, I believe, a look in the past, where
Mm.
qualitative data or interviews or just having a chat with the customer gives you an insight into the future, where
Mm.
you can understand that, okay, this is what the market need is. And once you combine a few of those, you can make a really like educated guess about, okay, what kind of products you want to build and how you want your products to evolve.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's how we are using, and then personally also, I'm a huge believer of like sitting and having a conversation with like a
Mm.
person, because it tells you a lot more than just what the data tells you on the screen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're the ones using it at the end of the day, right? So, but what would you
Yeah.
say are like some common mistakes that product teams make when interpreting user feedback, and how do you avoid them?
Yeah, I think it is. There's like two, three things. There's the taking things on face value. That's like the most common mistake. So if a customer comes to you and they're like, "I want XYZ to behave like this. I want they're essentially telling you the solution." And
Yeah.
a common mistake like early PMs or like junior PMs make is taking things on face value. And usually the avoiding those mistakes is on the other end, where you just have to take a step back and understand, like, okay, why is somebody asking me this question? And
Yeah.
it, it's like if a good doctor, where when you show up to a doctor, and a good difference between like a mediocre doctor and really good doctor is that the good doctor will ask you a question eventually to get to
Mm.
what you're feeling,
Yeah.
and it, everybody else you have to like really tell, and then they are on the listening end. I think a good PM also is more like a researcher and a doctor. They are able to get to the core of the need by
Yeah.
asking questions, by maybe even challenging norms of customers. So for example, being able to ask customer, like, why do you have this process the way you have it?
Yeah. Yeah. Probing,
Normally,
right?
exactly. It's very easy to go into a call with a $1 billion company thinking whatever they're doing is absolutely right. But
Mm. Mm.
sometimes it actually, they might be following a pattern, they might be following a certain process for whatever reason, and then it's your job to understand, like, well, why are you doing like this? And then it might help them understand, oh wait, actually you're right. If we do it a
Yeah.
different way, then our need evolves. So it's actually like really discovering. So not taking anything at face value, I think that's like a huge thing. And the other thing is recency bias. So in my role, I talk to a lot of salespeople as well. So external interviews and external conversations is one thing, but internal also. And a very common, um, a very common phenomena from sales conversations. Every time you speak to a salesperson, they are talking about their latest deal. So
Mm.
when you ask them, what should we be working on? They're going to be talking about maybe a sum of their last 3 deals.
Yeah.
They're not going to be talking about like a deal they had 6 months ago, which was maybe close lost, but now they forgot about it.
Mm.
So the recency bias is always there. So as for PMs, it's good to understand that, okay, and good to actually collect the data on what is more loud and recent and what is
Mm.
actually the more important. So
Yeah.
those in my career in essentially everything, that's what I've seen is like the most common mistakes, and
Yeah.
avoiding is just straightforward, just applying more critical thinking to this.
Mm. Now, I really want to talk to you as well about these kind of real world product challenges in like product teams and product management as well. In your experience, how does conventional product management differ from, let's face it, like messy realities of like high growth
Yeah.
companies?
Yeah. So it's a good point. When I started doing product management, my role wasn't called product management. So this is interesting. A
Mm.
year and a half into my role, somebody came, like we hired like a head of product, and then that person was like, "Okay, you're actually product manager." And
Mm.
that's the moment when, for me, it was like, okay, what is a product manager? Like, it's a very common human nature that once you tell somebody or something, they're gonna be thinking like, okay, how do I become better at what I'm doing?
Right.
They're
Right.
gonna be looking into that. So that got me into the conventional wisdom of like reading certain books. There is basically, if you Google how to become a better product manager, it's highly likely you're going to come across the same books that they were there 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that it's very common to fall into that trap, and I think it's also necessary and great because if you are a product manager, I do think you should go read those books or follow those courses. But what it's teaching you like theory, it's not a real world application.
Exactly. And I mean, it's full of these kind of, theoretical, I don't know, prioritization frameworks. You got Rice or Moscow or whatever it is. And they give clear answers, right? But in reality, it can be much messier, right? It can be much different. Stakeholder urgency,
Right.
market shifts, like things can change overnight, right? So it's more like, do you
Yeah.
have to rethink these principles or adapt over time?
Yeah, I can give an example. Like one of the most common things that every single course and book will talk about is the product requirement, or like a one pager, or you whatever you want to call it. Everything
Yeah.
centers around the idea that there needs to be a clear requirement, and that's great. Um, but in real life, what you learn is that there are humans on the other end who are going to be
Mm.
reading and consuming this document, and humans are um, very diverse. So everybody has a different way of thinking. So we just talked about like Deel operating on a global scale. I have people from in my team like in Brazil, in Europe, in UK, in India. So there's like different cultures in one team,
Mm.
and different cultures, different background, different education systems they've gone through. So it's very hard to actually convey an idea in a uniform way. So I could write the best product requirement document, but then five people are reading it, they're going to perceive it the five different way. So the challenge
Mm.
becomes like, how do you convey that in in like the shortest time, but also like in the best to the best of your ability, so your team is able to get on like a mutual ground as fast as possible.
Mm.
So the conventional wisdom is talking about like great product requirements and everything, and maybe people will also start following templates. But when it comes to real life, sometimes it's only about writing like a user flow and then maybe sketching it out. And there are few
Mm.
people on the internet right now who are very like opposed to writing product requirements, and they're more about like the flows in FigJam. So
Mm.
the key difference is adapting to your environment. We know that product requirements are important, and they're definitely important. I'm not saying there shouldn't be product requirements or documents, but the question is that how do you adapt that to that environment?
Yeah.
Um, I
And
got a
how do
really
you,
good. Go ahead.
yeah, go on. Sorry.
I was gonna say I got a really good advice, non-product related advice a couple of years ago, and that was one of my when I was doing startup weekend. It was like the facilitator's job is to be on the stage. So I asked him like how to be a really good facilitator, and he said, "Don't apply the same. thing, like the same learning or the same routine to every single room.
Mm.
Find your true self in the room you are.
Yeah.
And that is the core to it. Like your product skills, like as a product manager or anybody, will evolve, but like finding authenticity in the situation you are in, that
Mm.
goes way beyond the conventional wisdom you're going to learn in courses and books.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point, actually. But what advice would you give to someone who's kind of transitioning from this, from a textbook approach, right, to dealing with the ambiguity of real world product development or real world execution?
Yeah. Um, Actually, it's interesting because like somebody reached out to me not too long ago, and they asked like, "Hey, I've been switching my career, and I just like
Mm.
did this product course, and I want to apply for like jobs. What is the advice you have for me?" And I said, I'm going to say the same thing I said to them, which is like, keep applying to jobs, but in the meantime, go build something, go build a
Yeah.
software, go build a business, because you're going to learn how to do sales, you're going to learn how to do marketing, you're going to learn how to do customer like interviews, or you're going to learn how to essentially find out what you need to build, and then you're going to do iterations. So you're going to fail. You're going to do everything a product manager does in that cycle. And
Mm.
the day, I would say, this should be the default for a lot of people who want to get into a product. They should try to build something, and they should try to sell it, because it teaches you everything you need to know about building or being a great product manager. Because like I said earlier, now I look at product managers as people who are not just responsible for products and features, they're responsible for business outcomes, and then they
Yep.
building and scaling business lines. And all of that you can only learn when you are in a real life scenario.
Mm.
It's great if you get a job, if somebody takes a chance on you, then you actually get to do it on the job. But
Yep.
if you are transitioning, let's say fresh out of university, or you're just in a career switching point, the best thing is to go build something. It could
Yep.
be anything.
Yep.
Now with
And
AI, it's super easy.
yeah, I was going to say, and that was kind of my next point. Obviously with AI's role now across companies, but particularly within kind of product management, it's transforming how companies are building and how they're launching, how they're scaling products, right? How do you see AI reshaping collaboration between product managers and developers, engineers?
Yeah, I do think so. We already have seen how AI has, like in just a few years, impacted how we do our work. Companies are shaped. And I think it's going to keep evolving. One of the things I'm looking at, and it's actually there's a company from Sweden which is doing this like AI native employees, Lovable.
Yeah, lovable.
So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, so they have this like AI native workforce, which means that by default everybody can they know their way around AI, whether it's
mm,
about coding, whether it's about anything else. So I do think AI native employees is going to grow in future. And when it comes to the product role, I do think eventually the role of a developer and a PM would somewhat there will be like less and less gap between that role.
mm,
Traditionally, when we look at a lot of companies, there's very clear boundaries between what a PM should do and what a developer should do and what a designer should do. I do
yeah,
think AI is allowing us to actually sort of merge those boundaries to be more efficient. I'll give you an
yeah,
example. On one of my teams, um, one of the team leads we have, he built basically this, and it's something we're only using locally. So he built basically using Cloud and then IDE a flow where we can essentially take a requirement or set of like flows which we want to execute, and then we can just have like a working prototype in
mm,
just a few minutes. And then
yeah,
we go from actually having a requirement to a design to like an implementation. We go
mm,
from essentially, I mean, all of that time reduced to just going from a very high level requirement or
yeah,
flows right into the prototype. And then we can then align around that prototype, which then goes into the development. And I think
yeah,
that's very interesting because it just makes everybody incredibly efficient. And over time, I think that's where everything is headed, where the product managers and the developers, the product teams will become more AI native, and these flows will become more common, where everybody centers around the requirement, and then they're able to requirement as in what the goal they're trying to achieve, and
Mm.
then from there they're able to rapid prototypes, and then actually translate that into scalable solutions.
Yeah.
For PMs, last thing. So for PMs, I think the dependency on AI and being able to have some agentic flows is also going to be very important. Like I personally use a lot of different GPTs and flows, which help me throughout my day.
Yeah.
Um, and I
Yeah.
think that's, again, going back to the AI native part. So that's going to have an incredible impact on how small teams can be very efficient.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's interesting you bring up Lovable as well, because I think Lovable is a good example, but there are other tools as well where I think, particularly in this area, for PMs, you can essentially use natural language prompting, right, to build working
Yeah,
prototypes. Like MVPs and is nothing new really, but that kind of speed to MVP, or kind of validating an idea or a hypothesis, you can do so much quicker, and PMs can do it themselves as opposed to kind of ideating and asking engineers to do it for them. I think it's a really, really exciting time, and I think it's also going to become part of that kind of mainstream part of product workflows. So super
yeah,
excited.
absolutely.
But do you like what new skills or tools should aspiring PMs focus on to stay relevant as kind of AI becomes more integrated into workflows?
Um, so I do think it's more about like skills than tools, because tools keep evolving. And then if people are really clinging to tools or they're learning tools, eventually what happens over time is that the tools gets replaced with something else, and then
Mm.
everything. I would say right now, um, having having to learn how to work with like different LLMs. So whether it's OpenAI, Anthropic, or anything, having to learning how to work with those and building different like basic level Gen AI agents, or like very intricate AI agents using like different tools like N8N or Zapier. I think that's where everybody can learn quite a lot, because it just cuts down that barrier which we used to have, which you were just saying, that people can now use like NLP to talk to the AI, and then they can prototype.
Mm.
I think that's very important right now as a skill set. So previously, I used to say that my friend runs like a coding boot camp, and sometimes I was joining just like as like a guest contributor. And I used to say to everyone in the class this one thing: is like the most important skill is to how to Google. Like everything exists on Google, and
Yeah,
this is the most important
you just got
skill
to
as
find
that.
it, right?
Exactly. And I think today it translates into the most important skill is how to work with an LLM. Like how do
Mm.
you actually get the most out of it? So so that you can take a conversation that you had with anybody, like a customer or even internal. And I do this quite a lot. We have basically now Gemini integrated in our calls, so we get transcript, and I would just keep asking Gemini a bunch of questions till I can get like the most compact information that I can take from it. And
Mm.
sometimes I would just take a series of calls, put them together, and then go get to the information I want to get to. So it's like, how do you take, how do you, let's say, unorganized data, and how do you organize it?
Yeah,
And that's just like, as it's a useful skill to have, how you can work with the LLMs. And then in general, like for PMs, um, I think sales is a very underrated skill. And
mm.
it's a controversial view, but selling is it's a lot about listening, then it's about talking. And
Mm.
it's a lot about um, being persistent, or having a lot of resilience. This is what I've learned from salespeople in my life. Like, you need to be a good listener. You need to be persistent,
Mm,
and you need to be resilient. And as a PM, these are skills which will take you very far. With or
mm,
without AI, like, these are like the core skill I think everybody should have in their arsenal to go far.
mm, mm. And to talk a little bit about individual contributors, because I believe you've been, vocal about the rise of the kind of senior IC product role, right? Can you explain a bit why you think this model is kind of gaining momentum?
Yeah, it's actually touches on our previous conversation also with the AI.
Mm,
So I've been an IC all my life by choice. Every company I've interviewed at, I've almost the same thing, that I want to manage people. I just want to build things,
mm,
and
mm,
that's the path I want to go to. I do think over a lot of years, generally the market, the labor market, or the companies have been optimizing for like a career path for everyone where you move up and become a manager. And once you become a
yeah.
manager, you can be hands off. And then you're essentially in the manager mode. And
Mm,
also in Silicon Valley, there's, you probably read this Paul Graham article recently, like founder mode, which
yeah.
touches on pretty much the same thing. Like founders, when they grow their company, at a certain point, they just hire people who can then scale their
Exactly. Yeah.
companies.
Yeah.
And they start losing control of their company and the creative control, and then the company loses its soul.
Mm,
And the super IC or the senior IC is pretty much like the same concept, where
yeah.
if you are, it takes you, I believe, 5 to 6 years to become a really good IC at anything you're doing. As if you're developer, designer, whatever, it takes you that amount
Mm,
of years. And what usually happens is that if you spend that many years, and if you're good, you get promoted to a manager. And then
yeah.
you are in meetings all day and you're aligning and everything. And then a lot of people lose their soul. Like the
Yeah.
companies lose their soul. So
Yeah.
I'm of the view that if somebody is good at building, they should be just building their heart out. And companies should actually force them, not force them, but more like optimize for them to remain individual,
Mm,
like I see, as
mm,
long as they can,
mm,
because that's how um, everybody can get the most value out. And then once you start optimizing for that, then there's other discussion. It's like, who will manage that? So
yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
which is a very good question. It's like, why do we need
Exactly. Yeah.
managers? Like,
Yeah.
okay, so we need maybe managers so you can like take a day off or plan your holiday, or talk about your career
Yeah.
progress. But I think maybe there can be other roles for that. Right now, in like, if you take the a good sample size of any companies, usually managers are the ones who are deciding quite a lot. And I don't think it's a necessary role. Um, Maybe at a scale where you have thousands and thousands of employees, you need some sort of structure.
Mm,
But for teams, even like departments that are like under 50, I don't think everybody needs to have like a line manager. You could also have like one manager in the department and let people build their heart out. Let them focus on the things that are important. So there's less meetings. There's a lot more about focus on building. And
yeah.
as senior I do think what matters more is that the better you become at building a product and a business, the more time you should be spending on doing that.
I'm doing it. Yeah.
And
And doing what you're good at. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a super interesting point because I can really agree with it. Like the fact that you want those people that are good at doing something, doing that thing, right? As opposed to, handing it. I mean, other people can become good at it and everything like that. But it's like you say about the kind of the fact that companies or teams might lose a soul. But it's kind of, do you think we're going to continue in this direction where there will be more kind of senior ICs in these roles, or like, and then what impact does that have on leadership dynamics on these kind of, let's face it, traditional career ladders, right? The progression that everyone in company has become used to over time. Because I also see this kind of like potential tension here, insofar as companies can also struggle to recognize or reward individual contributors at the same level as managers, right? It becomes, yeah, a nature, really. So it kind of feels like this, it's the default kind of prestige path is moving up into management. you know? So it's kind of, there's a
Yeah,
potential
definitely.
tension there, right?
Yeah, I definitely think like everything is stacked against ICs because
Mm,
usually becoming a manager gives you the path to becoming a director and like a VP and everything, where essentially you have like more compensation, which is like more the better outcome for you as like a human, you know.
mm,
While on IC you only have a limited path, and I think like the difference between like a average company and good companies is like recognizing how important these ICs are. So this is where
mm,
Deel does really well is two things. One, there's a set IC path where you know that okay, how like where do I go from where I am if I want to be IC?
mm,
And I've seen actually people switch. You know, people become manager, they realize, oh, this is not what I want. I'm going to go back to IC, and then they
yeah.
keep progressing, and then they actually have a path which aligns like in every single way. And the other thing is leadership. Um, I don't believe a person should be a manager to be a leader. I think the the better you are at your craft, naturally you're going to become a leader.
Mm,
Um, and
mm,
it's about leading by influence, and this goes right into the ethos of being a product manager. They say that product management is where you're um, influence without authority. And that
mm,
also goes true for like senior IC roles, whether you're a dev or a designer and anybody, that the more senior you become, you're going to have to learn leadership. You're going to have to learn influence across
yeah.
different teams. Let's just
Yeah.
say a very senior IC developer should have influence across the company or
Mm,
across like a certain business line on how certain systems are architected or certain engineering decisions are made. You don't
mm,
want to take just the managers to be making those decisions. You know,
yep.
the weight of like senior people carry. I think Steve Jobs used to do this thing where he would take like 100 people, managers and not from across the company, and do an offsite with them. And
Mm,
that goes right into this. You know, it shows that you don't have to be a manager or certain reporting line to actually to be a leader. So
no.
a leader could be anybody who who has the ability to bring people together.
Yeah.
And sports is a good example. Um, in any sports you play, I used to think when I was young, like when I was a kid, like how football teams use their captains. Like what
Mm,
exactly is the
mm,
pro? How do you become like a captain?
yeah.
And eventually, over time, I learned that okay, it's about the influence somebody has. Like the
Mm,
more the
mm,
team members' ability, uh, more somebody has the ability to actually drive the team as a whole, naturally becomes like a captain. They still have an IC role if you think about it, right?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
probably like a center back or a goalkeeper, but you are a leader of the team, and
Yeah.
it's more about your influence rather than you managing the whole team.
Yes. Yeah. And we're talking a little bit about traits here, but when it comes to like building great product teams, not just kind of these ICs, in your view, what qualities or skills are essential for kind of great product teams? What do you look for in developers and designers?
Um, Great product teams. I think there's in the great product teams, one of the key things that matters, or in great companies, is a shared vision
Mm,
and people having a very high conviction behind that vision. Because um, if you want to take like a whole team far, everybody needs to work for like a vision, right?
mm,
So identifying the key team members is a lot more about finding the right fit for what you are trying to do as a team or as a company. I think that's when it comes to when I'm looking for people and when I'm interviewing people, that's like subconsciously or even like consciously, that's what we are like trying to look for. Is that okay? How well do you align with this vision? Because this is gonna become hard. Like
yeah.
being
Yeah.
being the example of Deal, and before that another company, and before everything I've done, it is hard. It's just a different level of hard, but everything
Mm,
becomes hard after a time.
mm,
So having like a shared understanding and shared conviction for a vision as a team goes like very far. So look, I think that's very important. And I think this it's very obvious, but sometimes it's not. It's the communication. It's like how people are able to communicate with each
Mm,
other and how they're able to build that shared understanding. Because I'll give you an example of Deal. So Deal is like I just said previously, we're everywhere, and we actually have a
mm,
core value together everywhere. So
mm,
people are in like we just had a team member join in Mexico last week. So Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, UK, and then you have like Bosnia, UAE, India. We go
mm,
all across the world, and then so many
mm.
different people, so many different cultures. And communication becomes very important. In
Yep.
in different cultures, there are different ways to do things. There are different ways people express themselves. Like for example, in Netherlands, people are very direct,
Mm,
and they wouldn't mean wrong or bad for anybody, but they would be actually very direct and just say, "Oh yeah, this is not good. You didn't do good here." But
mm,
what I learned in some other cultures, being very direct is actually can be taken as like a negative thing, where
mm.
somebody's like, in some cultures, we want to sugarcoat things. So communication becomes very important.
Yep.
Um, and then this last thing, which is it could be like company to company, but I think like being able to be your own leader is very, very important.
Mm,
Um, we had actually I was listening to this talk, it's like the previous CEO of Walt Disney, and he said a very interesting thing. He was like, hire people who have achieved something in their life, like like the A grader, or they've won like a gold medal in something, accomplishment, whatever. And I learned in my life that you can only accomplish something when you're a leader of yourself. Like you need to have
mm,
discipline in your life to achieve great things. And
mm,
being able to identify those team members, I think that that's the key. Like
mm,
because as a group, you will go together when the group is functional, but sometimes things can get dysfunctional. So like
mm.
people who are leaders of themselves can actually be great contributors to your teams.
Yeah. And when it comes to kind of specific skills, I think I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how, particularly in the current age of AI and everything, like how do we assess for great engineers to join your teams at Deal? For example, let's say you're recruiting for an engineer. How do you go about assessing them in today's age? Because it's not just about technical skills anymore, is it?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's not just about the ability to be great at tech. Like we are interviewing for a role, and then like from we are also involved from a product standpoint. And then one of the key things we're looking for there is the ability to interact with the customer. Like how customer forward have you been, or like how much is your communication, what's your communication ability when it comes to talking to customers? I think
Mm,
there's also like a stigma which has been brewed over years and years, which is like engineers, they are like leave them alone and everything. They're on in their shells, they're not great at communicating. But I don't think that's right. I think any great builder is also great at listening and communicating. So like from at least a product standpoint, that's what we are always looking. And especially in the age of AI, there's a lot of skills people are losing. Like by default now, people are forgetting how to write a good piece of article or anything. How
yeah.
do you write a good
Yeah.
email? Because you just go by default
Yeah.
to like ChatGPT and try
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
get it to write something. So the interpersonal skills are super important. So like your EQ becomes super important. So I
Mm,
personally believe those are the skills to identify, and those are the skills to work on as well.
mm. Yeah. I think it's a really, really good point, important point, that kind of EQ. I think um, empathy is also often cited as this kind of critical skill for product managers as well, specifically. Um,
Yeah.
how do you cultivate kind of empathy within your team?
Um. So this is one of those things which is like you take, which is I've learned that I naively believe everybody has empathy, but nobody
Mm.
really asks the right question: how do you cultivate it? Um, it's like throwing somebody into the ocean and asking them to learn to swim, and that's why just putting somebody in the situation
Mm.
has to be taking them with you into situations where they will have to learn empathy. Which is, I think,
Mm.
if you're a PM and you don't have empathy, I don't think you're the right fit for
Yeah.
the job by
Yeah.
default, because you're going to need that.
Mm.
But let's just say when we talk about engineers, when we talk about designers, it's taking them or enabling them to have conversations across the board, whether
Mm.
that's with customers, whether that's with salespeople. Um, I am actually at a point right now with all of my teams that they're having conversation with customers without actually me being present in the call.
Mm.
They're having conversations with sales folks, and then we're aligning afterwards. And I think that's like a great sort of like uh, it's a great culture to have, because you're not in the center of two people. I
Yeah.
believe an engineer should be able to have a direct conversation with any non-technical person, and be that customer or like sales or customer success, anybody. And the cultivating empathy comes from there when you sort of expose them to those environments
Mm.
um, where they're sort of like curtains get like they come off, they really understand that, okay, I need to I need to now process what I've been told. So, and then I need to actually come back to the person and then explain something to them in the way they understand. And over time, you
Yeah.
coach them. So one quick example I'll give you is almost all engineers who are not um, very frequent in like customers or non-tech conversation will default to explaining why something is done certain way. So for example, if a feature is built a specific way, and yet they're in a customer conversation and the customer is asking them something different, the engineer will default to explaining to the customer that, oh yeah, but we've built it this way because X, Y, Z. And most of the times
Mm.
the other person doesn't care. It's like, I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
care how
Exactly.
you built
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I care about how you're going to solve my problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's an example of when like cultivating empathy is basically putting them in those conversations where they learn that, oh, okay, like my default response is actually built over years and years of talking to mostly people in the tech space where they're trying to understand how something will. But now I'm actually being forced to understand why this other person doesn't care.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let me understand the information they are looking for, so I can actually help them the best. So
Mm.
it's just the exposure. The more exposure people have to a certain environment, the better they're going to become at performing in those environments.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And looking ahead to the future of tech, product management as well, as we start to round off here. What excites you most about the future of product management over the next, say, I don't know, 3 years, for example?
Um, Definitely AI, but at this point, AI is very broad. So it's a
Mm.
broad term. It could mean a lot of things. I think the ability, the vibe coding, by the way, it's like super exciting to
Mm.
me. I think I'm keen where it goes, like how it evolves, and like how general public will adapt to it, and how product teams definitely will adapt that. The example I gave, like how we go from like an idea to rapid prototyping, I think that will evolve more. I'm
Mm.
super exciting about that. Excited about that. Another thing that keeps coming like in my head, which is it's like a problem space, which is like the multiplayer AI game. It's like right now AI is very much single player game. You have your own subscriptions, you
Right.
have
Yeah.
your own AI agents and everything. But I think a shared, like a multiplayer situation where it's either the company has a shared AI brain where everything is feeding into this shared data pool, which then anybody can use in companies to actually accelerate their or become more efficient or accelerate their product decisions or build
Yeah.
like better products. I think that's like one of the things I keep thinking about, like how that's going to be super helpful.
Mm.
So um, I think yeah, those are two things. But at the same time, like if we talk about like non-AI stuff, I think it's becoming now more than important, more than ever, um, to learn how we as humans are actually going to evolve in like our
Mm,
interpersonal skills.
mm.
How is that going to evolve? I'll give you like a small example right now. Like I was listening to, or I was actually reading a LinkedIn post where somebody was like at a webinar and there were 28 attendees and 26 of them were just like these AI note takers.
Summarizing the whole webinar for someone on the other end. Oh my god.
Yeah. So,
God.
which tells you that eventually there's going to be an AI webinar and then there's AI note takers. But then it's like, okay, there is evolution of human communication happening here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's
Must have been
right now
quite an experience for the person hosting the webinar, right? Like, who am I
right.
talking to? Two humans, 26.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to become. I'm curious about how we will evolve, how our interpersonal skills will evolve
Mm.
over time, and yeah, there's a lot of work to be done there. So
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, Kitsad, is there anything else you want to add before I wrap up?
no, I think we touched on quite a lot of things, and I'm very curious
Yeah,
how we yeah how everything goes forward.
me too. Well, yeah, been a really, really interesting, fantastic conversation. So nice to hear your insights. Lots we've spoken about on customer centric innovation, AI, craft of product leadership. So thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Builders for more inspiring conversations with the people shaping the future of work and technology. Until next time, keep innovating and keep building. We'll see you soon.